Well, hello. Welcome back to another episode of I'm Not Triggered, the podcast. I'm your host, Adrian Purchase, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. Today, we're going to talk about radical acceptance. And I got to tell you, when I first heard about radical acceptance, I was like, no thanks. I'm good. I'm fine right here, not accepting, not approving people's behaviors and actions and decisions, right? So today we're going to break down what radical acceptance is, what it isn't, and how it could be useful for you. But first, I got to tell you, I'm not a certified therapist or a professional in any way. I'm a combat veteran. I've done a lot of different therapeutic modalities, and I've just found that DBT has been incredibly helpful for me. And I've learned a lot by going to group and meeting with my therapist and doing coaching calls, doing my own research, and applying these skills, really applying them to my own life. That's what I hope to give to you. So if you like what I'm doing here, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. You can hit the bell so you don't miss anything. There's new videos every Sunday. All right, let's get going. So what is radical acceptance, right? The first thing is radical acceptance. It's not approval. It's not agreement. It's not about giving in or being passive. It's not about accepting harmful behavior from other people. It's not about never trying to change things. And it for sure is not about whether you like what's happening or not. So radical acceptance is really useful because it keeps us rooted in reality. Radical acceptance is completely accepting reality as it is in the moment without fighting it, without thinking, God, this should be different. I wish it were different. I wish it were different. I want it to be different. It should be different. It shouldn't. That's not accepting. That's just causing internal suffering. It's 2025. It's almost August. I'm in the Midwest in America. And I feel like my country's on fire. And there's not a damn thing I can do about it. I did my part. Like, I literally served in the military and went to war and I voted. Like, that's all I can do, you know? I can be a good citizen, right? I try. It's hard to accept what's going on in the world. It is. It will always be difficult to accept. That's why radical acceptance, it's not an event. It's not like a task that you put on your to-do list for the day. I'm going to radically accept today, could be, I guess. But radical acceptance, true radical acceptance, it's an ongoing process. It's kind of like grief. I know, weird, right? But the two are similar in that they just take what they take, and you often have to keep doing the process of accepting or feeling the grief of something. Because those two kind of just keep going. As long as life continues, we feel grief, we feel suffering. There are going to be lots of things we don't like, but have to deal with, right? So radical acceptance is truly about acknowledging reality without trying to change it, without adding judgment and extra emotional suffering. It stops us fighting against the tide of denial. Radical acceptance helps us create a mental space. It gives us our energy back to do other things. And radical acceptance is the foundation of literally change. If you want to change anything in your life at all, you have to actually radically accept the fact that there needs to be change. Now, sometimes it's easy to radically accept something that needs to change because we want it to, right? But sometimes we don't want it to. We have to radically accept it anyway. So if you're thinking, all right, that sounds pretty easy, this radical acceptance thing. I did this for breakfast, That's great. I'm glad you could teach me how to do it. But if you're asking, if this seems so simple, why is it so hard? Well, the first answer is because we're human, right? If you look at any animal, they kind of radically accept their reality, right? My cat, he was down here being really annoying. I love him very much. But I'm trying to do this, and it's hard for me to pay attention to him and play with him and hang out with him while I'm doing this, right? Now, I like to think it hurt his feelings that I was like, I can't play with you. He probably is up there licking his cat balls. I don't know what he's doing. He just went and did his cat thing, right? But because we're human, we take the impact of things and it affects us. It does, whether we want it to or not. Now, our brains are literally wired to fight against things that we do not like because things that we don't like, our brain and our body just assumes they are threatening. Does this make sense, right? So if you don't like something, it's going to be very difficult to accept it. I used to think if I just worried enough, if I planned enough, if I controlled things enough, that I could prevent, bad things from happening. Like I thought I had that power. But the truth is I don't have that power. I barely have the power to manage my own my own life without trying to manage everything else, right? And I didn't have any energy because I was spending it all trying to live in the future that I couldn't accurately predict, right? Because like I've said this before, we're running on corrupted data. If we have a lot of trauma, our data is not pure, right? But research shows us that when we practice radical acceptance, something really interesting happens in our brains, right? So instead of activating all of these executive control areas that try to suppress or change emotions, acceptance actually deactivates the parts of the brain that are associated with this kind of rumination and this anxiety, this self-focused worry. And that's called the default mode network. And that's just a sciencey, it's like the least sciencey thing about the brain. I think everything else is like Latin like, right? Now, the default mode network, I've talked about this, I've written about this in my Substack, and I'll probably do an episode on it too. It's running behind the scenes. It's like if you have a computer, your operating system, your default mode network is kind of like your operating system in your brain. It's running all the time. That's kind of what keeps the brain going all the time, whether you're asleep or awake. That's why it's called the default mode, right? But you can change your default mode. That's the thing, right? So we get wired to be a certain way, and then we can change how we are wired to some degree. In radical acceptance, it basically just it interrupts the mental loop that keep us stuck in this thinking of, man, it shouldn't be this way. I need to control this. I need to control that. Why is it like this? Rather than trying to muscle our way through our emotion, shove it down, pretend like it doesn't exist. And the research backs this up. And this is kind of mind blowing. So there's been brain imaging scans done. So scientists have done brain imaging studies on people practicing acceptance versus other emotion regulation strategies, like the ones I'm teaching here. And what they found is that acceptance itself with present moment awareness of our bodies and our emotions. And what they found is that acceptance creates a completely different pattern of brain activity than trying to suppress or dismiss your emotions. So when we practice radical acceptance, we're actually teaching our brain to decrease how much activity there is in the areas that are associated with rumination, depression, anxiety, worry, insomnia. But it increased activity in other areas of the brain, the areas that are attached to things like present moment awareness and body sensation. It's like our brain literally turns from like dark mode to light mode. It's like off and on, And there's a distinct difference physiologically. We don't just get better at dealing with our emotions, but we actually get better at using other coping strategies as well. It's like acceptance is really this foundation that just makes everything else work together. The research on DBT, which includes radical acceptance as a core skill, it's one of the first that we learn. If you go through like the group class, I call it a class, it's therapy. The DBT research, it shows that this acceptance can have like a moderate to large effect for reducing symptoms of BPD, CPTSD, bipolar, substance abuse, eating disorders. I mean, it's kind of crazy, but think about it, right? I have an eating disorder. I've definitely have substance abuse troubles. I mean, I don't use them now, right? I'm clean and sober, but When I was much younger, I did have troubles. And it helps to think like radical acceptance is the key to decreasing the suffering, decreasing the infighting I have with myself with food and an eating disorder. Like that's what is exhausting. Me, it's exhausting. And that's something I'm working on now, right? But I have to radically accept the fact that this is a pattern. This is a behavior. This is a way that I've been coping for a long time. And now I got to change it. And it's hard. But I've accepted the fact that I have an eating disorder. And I don't have shame about it. I don't judge myself for it. And so when you can radically accept things that you don't like, even about yourself, it actually breeds self-compassion. How do we practice this? Like, practically speaking, how do we implement radical acceptance into our lives? So we have to start with noticing where our friction lies. Where's the resistance? Where's the hesitancy? Do we feel stuck? Do we constantly say things like, oh, this shouldn't be happening? Why is this happening to me? Again, here we go. If we're spending a lot of time on thinking about like, what if this? What if that? I wish I would have. I wish they would have. Why didn't they? Why didn't I? Why did I? Why did they? If you're doing that, that's definitely not radical acceptance. And then if you can start to feel like this surge of anger and panic that comes up when you're thinking things like, I cannot handle this today, right? It's all about noticing it. Noticing where we feel a little icky when something happens that we can't control. That is a good indicator that we can radically accept, whether we like it or not. And then we need to acknowledge what we cannot control, which is a lot of shit. We cannot control a lot of things. So if we radically accept the fact that we don't really have a lot of control, man, that will give you so much more energy. And then in DBT, we have a skill called turning the mind. And in this way, it just means taking your brain from thinking about sort of an incident in a negative, ruminating way, turning your mind over and thinking about it in a more positive way. Like, this is the active part of acceptance. This is the actual part where we have to become very aware that we are unaccepting to become accepting. And it usually has physiological symptoms. And then we can focus on what we can do right now to help us diminish our level of emotional suffering while working on radically accepting the situation for what it is. So let me give you a concrete example. Let's say that you just got laid off from work, and then your mind immediately goes to, this is a disaster. This definitely shouldn't have happened. I cannot believe I got laid off. What am I going to do? I can't handle this. Well, radical acceptance is more like, I lost my job. I got laid off. That really sucks and I don't like it. I'm really worried about money, but it's what happened. Now that leaves me able to go find another job instead of still being really mad about the fact that I lost my old job. Instead of ruminating. Ruminating is easier, but radically accepting is definitely more effective. I'm going to try to get ahead of a couple of these sort of like questions that people often have about radical acceptance, right? Like, well, what if it doesn't work? Yeah, it might not. It might not, because it's a process. Remember? We talked about that. You can radically accept the thing today, but then when you wake up tomorrow, you probably have to radically accept it again. And that's just the way that it is. And acceptance doesn't necessarily make our emotions better. It doesn't make them disappear. You might still feel sad or depressed or angry, right? But acceptance reduces the amount of suffering that we have about a situation because we're not adding in all these other emotions. Another pitfall is thinking that radical acceptance is like giving up, throwing in the towel. No, I'm good, but it's not. So acceptance is about acknowledgement. It is not about the future. It's about acknowledging the present. So you can accept that you lost your job, that you're unemployed right now, while still actively searching for another job, right? You can accept that your relationship ended while still believing you will find love again. Another kind of thought pattern that comes along, I know I had this one. I keep forgetting to use this skill. What's radical acceptance? I heard about it, right? And it's going to have to be practice. It's just like learning any new skill. And it's hard. Radical acceptance is hard. Otherwise, we would do it. I mean, if I would feel better for doing it, I would just do it, right? But it's not that easy, especially when you're amped up or triggered or emotionally dysregulated and in distress. Radical acceptance is really hard. So you can start practicing with like small, low stakes situations. You can accept the line at the grocery store instead of tapping, looking around, huffing and puffing, and kind of loudly complaining, right? Or being passive aggressive in the grocery store. I used to just, God, it would drive me nuts sitting in line anywhere in line, sitting in line in general. And that's something, it doesn't really bother me anymore. I mean, I also don't go to the stores often. I love deliveries. Those are great for my energy levels and my sanity, right? But I don't really get worked up over how long a line is anymore. And then radical acceptance, we could also have a concern that it kind of makes us look weak, right? Or that we approve or are permitting behavior or something. And that's just not the case, especially if we're used to just fighting for everything. So to wrap all this up, here's really what I want you to remember. Here's the takeaway. Radical acceptance is definitely a process. It's a process that is lifelong. You're going to have to radically accept so many things in your life. And the quicker you're able to do that and get there, gosh, the more happy and peaceful you will actually be and feel, I promise. Your capacity to feel joy and to allow yourself to have fun and adventure and awe and curiosity will expand. But you got to start small. Maybe if you're going through a breakup, of course you want to call your ex, right? But you shouldn't. We have to radically accept the fact that that relationship is over. And going to bed every night crying and thinking about how it could have been different. And if you just did this, if you did that, well, if I call and we talk, it'll be fine. It won't, probably. You're breaking all kinds of boundaries to this other person who probably was like, don't call me again. If you call, that is not for them, that's for you. I wouldn't want to be in a relationship with somebody who couldn't respect boundaries like that, right? So we have to remember that radical acceptance often feels gross, which is why we're hesitant to do it. But the goal is not to become someone who never gets upset or dysregulated or approves of everyone's behavior and is just going with the flow all the time. That's not what radical acceptance is. The goal is to become someone who can face reality clearly and respond rather than react, and put your energy towards things that actually matter to you instead of things you cannot control or change. So that's what I got for you today. I hope you learned something about radical acceptance and what that might look like for you and how to practically apply it in your life. If you have questions or comments, of course, I'd love to hear from you. You can leave a comment down below. Don't forget that you can check out my Substack for more information and lots of other stuff that I've written about mental health and more personal essays. And I really appreciate you being here. Until next time, take good care of yourself.